Once upon a time, there was a guy called Filip. He was an English teacher who used to love making grammar videos. He used to work really long days, as all teachers do, although his days weren't as long as they had been in his previous job. Not many people knew that Filip had been a retail manager at an international company before he became a teacher. One day, he woke up to his phone ringing. Unusually, he hadn't put his phone on silent so he could woken up. Annoyed, he looked at the screen. An unknown number, which had called him 5 times in the last 10 minutes, was calling again. Filip answered the phone. The caller was at his door. But before I tell you the rest of the story, let's look at some grammar first. If you are full of anticipation, and if you are enjoying my grammar videos, do give this video a like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Is there a grammar point which you'd like me to talk about next? And now, on to the grammar. He had been a manager before he became a teacher. Both of these actions are in the past. Which one happened first? Well, first, Filip was a manager and then he became a teacher. He had been a teacher is a sentence in past perfect, which we use when we are talking about the past and we want to mention an action which happened before another action in the past. To form past perfect, we use the auxiliary verb had and a past participle. Had is the same for all persons. To make it negative, we add the negative contraction to the auxiliary verb. So had not, which often gets contracted to hadn't. To make a question, we swap the subject and the auxiliary. And we can follow our quasi-quasum trick. So, had you been a manager? Auxiliary, subject, past participle. We usually contract the auxiliary had to the. He'd been a manager. I'd done the shopping. We'd been to London before our honeymoon. However, bonus fact, it's worth pointing out that would, the modal verb, gets contracted as the too. We use would in the result clause of the second conditional and to talk about hypothetical and imaginary situations. If you need a refresh on this, then click up here. However, how do you know whether the is would or had? Well, as we've just mentioned, past perfect uses past participle, or V3, or the third column of irregular verbs list. So, if there is a past participle after the in a sentence, then the sentence is in past perfect, like he'd been a manager before he became a teacher, because been is a past participle. Would, however, is always followed by an infinitive. He'd be a manager if he had a choice. The is would, because be is an infinitive. I'd like some ice cream, please. Would. I'd liked ice cream before I ate too much of it, and I got sick and never touched it again. Past perfect. She'd trained enough if she had more time. Would. She'd trained enough, so she won the match. Past perfect. So, let's practice pronouncing the contraction. First, I'll pronounce the subject with the contraction, you repeat. Then I'll pronounce the whole sentence, you repeat. It'll be great practice for you. Ready? I'd seen the film before. Alex'd already done his homework. They'd moved house. You'd told me the story before we left. We'd play football before we had dinner. Just to show you past perfect in a variety of different contexts, here are some more examples. I missed the bus because I'd left the house too late. First, I left the house too late, so I use past perfect, and then I missed the bus. They didn't eat anything because they'd already had dinner. This means your friends first had dinner at their own house, and then they came over to visit you and didn't eat anything. My dad couldn't start a car because he hadn't brought the car keys. First, he left the house without the keys, and then he realized he couldn't start a car. The train had already arrived when I got to the station, which means the train arrived first, and then Filip. My friends asked me the other day, had you seen Madonna before you saw her last month? And I said, yes, of course I had. I'd seen her twice before. First in 2012 and then in 2015. So, what did you learn today? Here are 5 quick questions to test you. Number 1. Do we use past perfect to talk about actions which happened at the same time as another action in the past, or before another action in the past? Number 2. What auxiliary verb does past perfect use? Number 3. He had read this book before. How do you make this sentence negative? Number 4. How do we contract had, and what else could the contraction mean? And question 5. What had you done before you started watching this video? Leave a comment below. And check your answers. The key is in the description of the video. Filip answered the phone. The caller was at his door. This is not what he had anticipated at all. He sprang out of bed and anxiously made his way downstairs. Of course, he'd put some clothes on first. And there it was, completely unannounced. The police. They'd come to arrest him. The officer started putting handcuffs on him, when, all of a sudden, the real alarm clock went off. That's when Filip woke up for real and realized he had only been dreaming. See you next week.